This Equipment World video is brought to you by Chevron Delo 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash. Hey guys, what's going on? Wayne here. You're watching Equipment World. Welcome into another episode of The Dirt, the video podcast that brings you interviews and discussions on the latest in construction equipment and what's going on in the construction industry in general. Today on The Dirt, we're going to be talking about the brand new Cat 963 track loader. Now, Cat has recently upgraded this machine from its K-Series model, the 963K, to a new no-letter suffix version called just the 963. That's part of Cat's new nomenclature and way of kind of naming its machines. They've kind of dropped those letters from the model name. So this new 963 track loader, it's got a bunch of new features. There's some power upgrades here with a new C7.1 engine. There's some differences in the cab. There's some new technology features, some new power modes. And to take us through all of this, including some of the bucket options and everything else, we're going to talk today with Sam Meeker of Caterpillar. Now, Sam is kind of Cat's kind of expert on all things tractor. He's basically their dozer product application specialist. And since there's a lot of kind of shared kind of construction and kind of design thought in these track loaders and their dozer lineup, Sam has joined us today to take us through everything that's new on this machine. So let's get into it. Sam, man, thank you so much for joining us today on The Dirt. Really appreciate your time, bud. How are you doing?
Oh, awesome, Wayne. How are you?
Can't complain, but hey, so, you know, this new 963, I kind of wanted to start by getting your, before we get into the specifics on the 963, I did want to start with getting your take on the kind of the track loader market in general. You know, what is kind of, in terms of track loader development at Cat, what is really kind of driving development behind these machines right now? What are you guys hearing from customers that's really kind of like pushing you forward and the changes that you guys feel like that you need to make to kind of you know, push this machine type forward?
No, you bet. So the interesting thing about track loaders, right? I mean, is they're kind of that versatile all-in-one type of machine. You know, you can definitely do some digging and some grading with it, but you can also load trucks with it. And now with the addition of quick couplers and being able to swap out your tools and whatnot, it's really become this all-in-one type of machine. And it always has been that. You know, I mean, it's always been that jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife type of machine out there. But really, I think our focuses on the next gen track loaders here are really to kind of bring in some of the successes that we've had in the dozer side of it. So, our next gen dozers are D5, D6, D7, the cab improvements on those, of course, the efficiency improvements on them, a little bit of technology as well too. And those types of things are what we're kind of trying to bring into the track loader market. So that's really what's driving, what we've got in this new 963 with, a little bit of change in power plant, some technology changes, brand new, monitor inside the cab, backup cameras, and all that kind of stuff to really kind of add a little bit of icing on top of what was already a pretty darn good machine, the 963K.
And beyond all of that, kind of zooming out a little bit from what Cat's doing, looking at the market in general, how do you feel like the Cat track loaders are kind of stacking up to the competition? How much interplay does that have with kind of like the other tractors, the dozers, and that interplay and everything like that? Are you guys taking some of the dozer developments and moving them over into this kind of product category? I'm just kind of interested to hear kind of what's going on with this machine category in general, in your opinion.
I think the track loader market in general is it's an interesting market, right? We've kind of got our traditional customers that have always bought track loaders, right? You've got your basement diggers, you've got some demolition guys, sewer and water, where they're chasing around excavators with buckets of stone and forks and whatnot. Waste handling, there's smaller landfills love the track loader because it can kind of do a little bit of everything. And then we're trying to get into some new markets as well too. Ship hold has been something that folks have liked with this. with two-way dozers where you pull that track loader up against the edge of the ship, and you're back dragging that material so that the clamshell buckets on the cranes can get a hold of them. So that's kind of a little bit of a newer style of market. I guess as much as anything, I think I'd like for people to understand that, as useful as you think a CTL is, a 259 or a 279, a track loader is just a great big skid steer, right? I mean, I always joke about, tractors are the original skid steers because we don't articulate, we don't turn any wheels, we skid to steer. And the track loader is the same way, right? I mean, this is, a two-track machine. You can get them with joysticks as well as the traditional V lever. And when you set this thing up with joysticks, it literally runs just like a skid steer, forward, reverse, left and right for your turn. And then your bucket and boom functions are on the right hand. So I think that's, in terms of customers using these machines, I think there's lots of places that we can be putting these track loaders out there where maybe we're not thinking about them, as a traditional machine. I'll just put a dozer there, or I'll put a wheel loader there. You get on job site situations, and a track loader can be an extremely valuable asset to have out there, and kind of do a lot of different jobs, on a just a typical site prep or industrial type of job site.
Well, Sam, kind of moving on into the kind of specifics on the new 963. There's a new engine in this. That's the new C7.1 engine. Horsepower has increased from 193 on the 963K. It's now up to 202. On this new model. Could you talk a little bit about the new engine? There's also a 15% increase in torque there too, which is a pretty sizable increase. So what's going on with the new engine? What kind of makes these power increases possible, both there on the horsepower and the torque? But before we get into that, I do want to take a quick second right here to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Chevron Lubricants. Look, protecting your diesel engine and its exhaust after treatment system, that has traditionally been seen as really an either-or proposition when it comes to choosing the engine oil that's going to protect your system. And that's exactly why Chevron spent a decade or more of R&D work developing a no-compromise formulation. Now, I don't have to tell you why a clogged DPF is bad news, but here's the real kick in the pants. 90% of that ash clogging up your DPF and then upping your fuel and maintenance costs, it comes from your engine oil. And you might be thinking, gee, why don't they make an engine oil with less ash in it then? You'll be happy to hear that Chevron agrees with you. They've developed a new ultra low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by 60%, radically reducing the rate of DPF clogging and extending DPF service life by 2.5 times. Before, you had to choose between protecting your engine or your after treatment system. Now, you don't. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology. It's time to kick some ash.
You really, when you're talking track loaders, the engine's part of it, but the rest of that drivetrain and that whole system together is kind of what really gives you those improvements in power and productivity. But yeah, it's our traditional C7.1. It was updated for the stage 5 emissions, which in Europe, of course, you've got to have the latest emissions, just like we do in the States. And stage 5 was the update for that. So we're able to give it just a little bit more horsepower. And then, but again, when you kind of start to think about the productivity of it, and that 15% more productivity on this thing, the key there is in the rest of the systems, in those drive systems, right? To where we can take and we can put more of that engine torque into the fluid, and therefore get that onto the tracks and onto the ground. And that's really kind of the key thing there in terms of that, that productivity, is being able to take more of that engine torque and put it to the ground. And so that was kind of the key thing in terms of that. Now, we don't talk about engines unless we're talking about efficiency as well too, right? Because it's one thing to put a bunch more torque to the ground, but if you can do it without burning much more fuel, now you're being much more friendly to that customer's pocketbook. reducing that fuel consumption. And that's kind of what we've done with this 963 is we're able to get up to 10% lower fuel consumption doing the same work because of a lot of the changes in the powertrain and specifically in the electronics of it as well too. One cool thing about this new the new controls in this engine is our modes, our auto modes in here. So we've got 3 different modes in here, and you can basically select automatic mode, eco mode, or power mode to kind of match the type of performance you're looking for from the job. So when you're thinking about the different modes, right? If you're looking to get as much power as you possibly can all the time, I mean, let's say you're really hitting it hard, you're slamming buckets as fast as you can. Well, that's going to be where you're going to go into power mode. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow that engine, it's going to have a higher initial RPM for the engine. All right. It's not going to automatically go down, but it's going to allow that engine to go up just a little bit more. So, 1800 is going to be our typical rated engine speed in power mode, but it'll let it go up to 2000 as it needs to give you that extra boost and extra torque when you need it. And so that's going to be your highest power mode. All right. In eco mode, that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. Let's say you're just toting stone to the stone boat, or you're carrying pipe, and you don't necessarily need all that power because you're doing a lot of traversing. Jump down to eco mode. That's going to drop that engine RPM nominal down to 1500 RPM. Okay. And then it's going to go between 1000 and 1800 as it needs to. So if it has the opportunity to, it'll drop down to 1000 RPM to idle, right? If you're sitting waiting, and then as soon as you grab a hold of one of those controls and give it an input, it'll go ahead and pop up to 1500. And then when you really start digging, it'll grow up to 1800. Our D6XC does something very similar to that, right? We start at a lower engine RPM, and then we'll grow the engine RPM as you need more power. And so a lot of the same logic has gone into this. And then, of course, probably a good place to go if you're not sure, the type of work you're going to be doing is set that guy into auto mode. It's gonna start you at 1600, and it'll go from 1200 to 1900. Again, the same logic behind that. It'll kick up as it needs to, but it's always going to try to want to go back down to that 1600. So, and to me, trying to reduce a little bit of fuel consumption. I mean, these guys are pretty big machines and pretty heavy pushers. They can burn 4, 5, 6 gallon an hour if you're really kind of getting into it. So 10% reduction in fuel consumption is pretty good. You can save a couple dollars an hour in fuel. That's a pretty good deal. I mean, if at the end of the day it starts to add up, just by flipping a working mode dial, and getting you in the right mode for it. So in terms of engine transmission, that's kind of where a lot of that has come in. Is not so much a lot of hardware changes on the engine, but definitely some software changes. And the way we use that torque is really the keys to that new power plant, as we call it.
Well, with that 10%, another kind of cool thing about this, that 10% reduction, at least in the materials that I have here, the 10% fuel consumption reduction actually comes in auto mode. Can you further, what is the how much is the potential fuel savings if you knock it down into eco mode?
Well, certainly you're going to have a little bit more going into eco mode, and it really depends on that. That application that you're using it in, right? So if you're in eco mode and doing the same work that you're doing normally doing maybe some medium to heavy type of work, you're digging a basement or something like that, you're probably you might not see that much of a change in that. But if you're let's say you're chasing an excavator, doing a little bit of backfilling and whatnot, where you're pushing, and then you're kind of sitting and waiting, and then you're pushing a little bit, and then you're sitting and waiting. When you get into those transient type of loads, that's where something like eco mode could kick up and give you even more fuel consumption. And again, it really depends on the type of work that you're doing. If you've got somebody that's idling with the tractor at full RPM all the time, you might get 20% fuel consumption reduction out of it. But if you've got somebody who's pretty good at turning the idle down, right, then eco might not give you that much, because that's kind of one of the things that eco does for you, is it helps to do that. But really, in terms of most applications, I would say auto mode is probably the best place to be in. and that's kind of where you'd want to default a new operator into until they until they kind of get a feel for what the work is, and then they can pick and choose between those other two modes.
Yeah, I mean, like that's actually you took the words right out of my mouth there. I mean, like I know that there's a lot of operator skepticism over power modes in general. I think a lot of that is starting to kind of calm down a little bit. And I think a big reason too, with something like auto mode, you've essentially got the best of both worlds. When you in the past when you had kind of like normal power and eco, I know a lot of guys would just throw it into power and that's where they'd sit all day just because they didn't really trust the eco mode in a lot of situations. But when you got this auto mode, that sounds like to me, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what you're saying, it sounds like it really kind of like you were saying earlier, because it grows that engine RPM. It seems like it's really wanting to be more toward that eco mode scale, but it's not limiting you. It's not kind of completely putting a top on the available power to the machine. So it's going to skew a little bit more toward more fuel conscious, but it's also going to give you that power when you need it. So to me, it sounds more like a no compromise kind of situation. And like you said, it's definitely the thing that you'd want to put, by default, most operators to go in.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I guess the industry did itself a disservice when we all launched power modes. And then it was just limiting the RPM, right? When it was something as simple as, oh yeah, well, put it in eco mode and it's only going to go up to this RPM. Where the fact that you're able to get some power growth when you need it, but then idle back down when you don't need it. That's really been the key to to these power modes in this. And honestly, I would just, anybody who's kind of a skeptic of power modes, I would throw them in a D6XE, and that is automatically power mode. I mean, it's automatically eco all the time. And people will be like, "What? No, it's not eco. That thing pushes, a house, man." Yeah, but it does it with very, very little fuel consumption, and it automatically will drop that RPM back down as it needs to. So it's, to me, that's kind of the best of both worlds is being able to get the power when you need it quickly, right? Because you don't want to lag, but then go ahead and drop that guy back down when you're, when you're in between pushes, so you can save a little bit of fuel there.
I kind of want to move on to buckets. Now you've got 3 buckets that this thing can be equipped with. You've got the general purpose, which is a 3.3 cubic yard. You got the multi-purpose, which is a 2.6 cubic yard, and then the performance series. This one boosts capacity by 20% to 3.7 cubic yards. Sam, talk a little bit about these 3 buckets. Who kind of each of them is for, the type of applications that they're for, and I guess who is best served by which of these buckets?
Yeah. So let me kind of start with your general GP style bucket, right? I mean, GP buckets have been around for a long time. You can get them with cutting edge. You can get them with teeth and segments. You can get them with both, segmented edges and whatnot as well too. So in terms of your general type of digging, maybe a little bit heavier type of soil, if you get into some heavy clays, maybe you're handling some stone that might be a little bit heavier as well too. That's going to be kind of your, and even, waste, C&D, right? If you don't have a waste bucket and you're doing a lot of C&D, you're breaking up concrete and doing that kind of stuff, that GP bucket's going to be a little bit stronger of a bucket and give you really good life, and really good, performance out of it. So I would kind of say that's at least a place to start, right? Is to consider GP and what it's good at. Then obviously the MP bucket, the multi-purpose bucket, when you get to where you're doing that variety of tasks where maybe you're getting into some heavier work where you do need to do a little bit of dozing with it, right? Maybe you're doing some land clearing and you want to be able to pop those stumps out. That cutting edge on that, and the fact that you're able to get that power into that edge, that's going to help you to do that a little bit better and be a little bit more durable system than popping trees out with a GP all the time, which you certainly can. Then of course that MP, the key thing about the multi-purpose bucket is the clamshell design of being able to grab a hold of material. All right. So if you are doing some land clearing, obviously you're getting that tree out. Now you need to get that guy picked up and moved over to the mulcher, or maybe to the truck to be hauled out or bucked out. however you're handling that. But that's the real thing, is that MP bucket in terms of that. Funny thing. I mean, I love MP buckets. I've got one on my skid steer, and that's all we ever use. We don't use a GP bucket on a skid. We always use the MP. So 259's got an MP bucket. And as my dad likes to say, you can go out and pick up a brick with that MP bucket if you want to. I mean, it's so fine and versatile in what you can do. And that's the thing with even track loader MP buckets. Get out there, you can pick things up with them. I was down in southern Indiana last year doing a little photo shoot, video shoot of a track loader on a landfill. And right as I was getting ready to leave, I had all my stuff up and I was driving out. And sure enough, this guy went over and he pushed, he kind of cleared off just a little bit of a tipper load, a dump truck load. And he found a washing machine in there. And so he reached over there at that MP bucket, picked up that washing machine, shook it off a little bit, and carried it over to their scrap metal pile, where they're recycling the metal. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I whipped my phone out real quick and take a picture of it, and it was just pretty cool. So that's the type of things, obviously, MP bucket. All right, now Performance Series bucket. So Performance Series bucket started with wheel loaders quite a few years ago. And the idea was, let's get something that will dig easier, dig a little bit faster, fill faster, right? And then also carry and hold more material, okay? And so that's really what this Performance Series is all about. So the Performance Series buckets, we actually open the throat of the bucket up a little bit. And so when you're loading that material into there, it's going to go ahead and fill that bucket up really nicely, right? You're not going to have those air pockets in the back of that bucket. So whether you're talking about, soil, even some of the more compacted, clays and whatnot, but certainly when you get into hauling, aggregate and materials, they load super fast. It avoids any of those air pockets in the back. And then we've got higher sides on it. Not only does it have that wider opening mouth, which gives you more material capability in it, but it's also got some higher sides on the side of it as well too, which helps to bulk that material up a little bit more. So, with a Performance Series versus a typical GP bucket, we're talking up to 20% more productivity because it does fill faster. You're carrying more material. And when you're talking about, load and carry type applications, digging basements, that type of thing, the more material you can carry, in each bucket, in each pass, the more productive you're going to be. So Performance Series has been very, very popular with customers, because it's a very good general, job type of bucket. Maybe not quite as durable as a GP if you're really getting into some heavier stuff. But, if you're doing some more sewer and water type work, chasing excavators, aggregate material handling, any of that kind of stuff, that Performance Series bucket is absolutely the way to go.
Yeah, and kind of moving up from those available buckets, you guys are also making the Fusion quick coupler an available option. And this coupler it makes changing between attachments a lot easier. And the other cool thing is that there's a bunch of attachments that can actually be shared between. If you've got this Fusion coupler on, it can be shared between your track loader and your wheel loaders, and some of the other Fusion capable machines. Talk a little bit about this Fusion coupler, kind of how it, from your experience, how it actually kind of plays out in the flow of operation, in the flow of kind of changing between tasks, and kind of what that looks like too, of kind of the utility of being able to share attachments between maybe even the same multiple machines on one job site, being able to kind of switch between attachments, and what are obviously you've got buckets and forks and stuff like that, but what are some of these specific kind of Fusion compatible tools that you guys have available?
The Fusion quick coupler has that was something that we that's probably been 12 or 13 years, maybe even 15 years since we came out with that. And that has been a really, really cool addition to the whole loader lineup, right? Wheel loaders and track loaders as well too. So let me just give you a little bit of a picture of what Fusion is if people don't understand what it is. So traditional type of bucket is, or a traditional type of coupler would be, a hook and horizontal pin, right? So you'd hook the top, you'd have a couple horizontal pins that would go out, and then you're always going to have a little bit of play in that. So your bucket's always going to have just a little bit of looseness. What Fusion does is it's got the hooks on the top, right? So you grab a hold of that bucket through the hooks, And then it has a set of vertical wedges, a pair of vertical wedges that get forced down hydraulically, of course, and they wedge the bucket and the tool together. So you've got that coupler, and then you've got that bucket. And what that does is it actually wedges that bucket into the coupler, and it keeps it tight all of the time. So you don't have loose buckets. They're not wobbling around on you. You're not wearing on the bucket or on the coupler because it's tight all the time, and it keeps pressure on it all the time, so it keeps it tight. So that's kind of the key thing about Fusion and what that's doing. Now, in terms of the range of Fusion, we have Fusion work tools for, I believe it's the 924, maybe even down to the 920, all the way up to the 972, I believe. And so, we always joked about, you could, pick up your, 9-yard 972 bucket and put it on a 924. Well, maybe not exactly, but the interface is there, right? I mean, you also don't want to pick up your 2-yard 924 bucket and put it on your 972. That won't, that bucket will be smiling at you very quickly. So, so I mean, just the versatility of tools, right, is great, and the fact that you can share some tools back and forth between the different machines. There are so let me talk just a little bit about some of the different tools that are out there. I mean, obviously, you've got your typical is going to be a GP bucket, even an MP bucket, Performance Series bucket, and then a set of forks. So your traditional sewer and water job site, using the forks to carry the pipe, and get that all staged and stacked, unload the trucks, that kind of stuff, and then drop those forks off, grab a hold of that bucket. You're carrying a bucket of stone to the boat for the excavator. Maybe you're knocking a little bit of the backfill in, clearing some things out of the way, right? And then dropping that bucket off, going back to the forks, kind of doing that all day long. Of course, as you'd mentioned, if you've got a couple different machines, maybe you got, 2 track loaders on a job site, right? And you've got one that's doing mostly backfill, well, he can run over and grab those forks and do that work as well too. But there's some other cool tools that we have as well too, right? I mean, we've got rakes. We have coupler rakes with or without the top clamps on them as well too. So, let's say that you've got some, you're doing a land clearing job and you're doing the sewer and water, and you've kind of got this whole job site going on where you're responsible for clearing material out, and prepping the entire job, and laying utilities in. Well, now you can throw that rake in there as well too. You're able to get that material, not only rake the roots and get that stuff out of the ground to clear that off, but you can always stockpile it too. And that's the great thing about a track loader is with the lifting capability, you can get that stuff stockpiled up, save a little bit of your precious real estate ground space there while you're waiting for your mulcher or trucks to come or whatnot. So blades, I mean, we've got, different types of blades that you can get, a trim blade, which is that chip hold trim blade as well too. And then just a variety of different, types of work tools that you can put on these things. And I think, to me, that's kind of the key, is being able to use this machine. It's kind of that skid steer or CTL philosophy, right? You've got one machine, it's the powerhouse, and you can use a lot of different types of tools with it to get the most value out of that track loader, and out of your investment.
Yeah, and I also wanted to talk a little bit about weight. The standard 963 weighs in at around just shy of 45,000 pounds. It's at 44,771. And obviously that's going to vary depending on the configuration. It actually goes all the way up to, if you get the LGP, you're right, almost at just over 50,181. I'd like to hear from you, just kind of, how does weight play in with one of these machines? Is this machine, did you guys make any changes to the weight on this machine over the K-Series machine? And like I said just a second ago, how much does weight kind of play into the performance of this machine? I know, just about across the board on your dozers, we had weight increases. on some of the newer machines. And obviously that's kind of messy too, because there was some recategorization in terms of size classes and stuff like that. But how much does weight kind of play into this machine, and is there any kind of weight increase on the 963?
Yeah, I mean, it's compared to the K, not a ton of hardware changes, and so it's going to be pretty similar in terms of that. That 45,000 pound range. I mean, getting that tractor in that size class, it's kind of important to keep that. Guys have trailers and whatnot, and they want to be able to get this thing hauled, make sure it's in the in the right range. So we got to be careful in terms of adding weight to it, but just like a dozer, your productivity is based on how hard you're pushing. We call that drawbar pull, right? Your weight, and then of course the size of the bucket or the size of the blade that's on there. So same thing with a track loader, right? I mean, more weight's going to equal a bit more productivity. But at the same time too, this is a little bit of that load and carry type machine as well too. So the more weight you have, it might not necessarily be it might not necessarily equal productivity in all applications. It's more to accelerate, more to decelerate when you're running around the job site. So, having a bunch of extra weight doesn't always help you out there. And again, it is related to that ground pressure as well too. So we got to be a little bit careful there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely, just because of the versatility of this machine, it's definitely something that you guys kind of have to, there's a little bit of a back and forth there. I did mention when we were talking, in the question about weights, I did mention the LGP configuration. There's also a waste handling version. That LGP version, talk a little bit about the just how low the ground pressure is there, and what are some of the applications, some of the situations that guys might want to opt for that LGP over the standard configuration. And I'd also like to hear you talk about that waste handling configuration and how that's different as well.
So we've always had a little bit of a LGP config, as an option. But now we've really kind of brought it to light and brought it in there. It was a bit of a secret squirrel thing for a while, but we brought that out, and that's going to take you kind of from your traditional 9 psi tractor down to about a 7 psi tractor with those wider shoes and that wider gauge on it. Also makes it a little bit easier to clean out as well too. So that's a great thing related to that LGP. Softer job sites, softer underfoot conditions and whatnot. We're getting more and more into some of these more, I guess, on the fringe job sites that get people nervous about getting that tractor stuck. So let me hit real quick just on the waste handlers as well too, as you'd mentioned there. So we on 963 we actually have 3 different waste handlers. We have kind of our traditional waste heavy duty, screens, guarding, air handling, all of that. Then we have a waste enhanced cleaning, and that's going to be that LGP undercarriage, which gives us a little bit more room for that material to fall down, a little bit easier to clean that, and some sites like that. And then we have our waste ES or extreme service, or kind of that demolition style machine, where we have even heavier guarding on there. The rear end guarding is even heavier and even more robust on that tractor as well too.
So yeah, Sam, there's a ton of technology, new technology features on the 963. I mean, there's operator profiles, there's passcodes for machine security. Of course, you've got Cat Link and Product Link for telematics, and Vision Link for the remote kind of monitoring and everything like that. You can connect to the Cat app, remote troubleshoot and remote flash, all of that good stuff. All really helpful. But you guys have also added a cross slope view on this thing as well. Talk a little bit about that and how that actually plays into operation and how that's helpful on a track loader.
Yeah, the slope indicate feature is one of the great things that we're doing on these new tractors. And of course, with the new 10-inch color touchscreen monitor, it gives you great visibility to that and several other features in the monitor. But I'm a big fan of slope indicate. It just gives you that little bit of a reading out there. Pretty simple. It just tells you whether you're on a 4.5 slope and if you're on a side slope. And so it really helps you to get, if you're trying to maintain a little bit of drainage or spread some material with just a little bit of fall to it. Gives you a little bit of a heads up so that pretty much where you're at in terms of slope on that. And from an operator's perspective, trying to maintain some drainage with that. especially when you're talking about that 1 to 2% slope, really kind of helps guys to be able to maintain that and kind of understand what that is. Some other stuff in the technology, again, that monitor in there, backup camera integrated right into the monitor. When you kick it reverse, it goes up to the full 10-inch. So it gives you some great visibility there. And then, of course, all of the profiles in for being able to set your snubbing for your hydraulics in there and all that kind of stuff. Really, really makes life easier to be able to set that in your operator profiles and your application profiles and save those. Of course, your service and diagnostics in there. All that stuff is really good in that new monitor. So we really hit a home run with that new monitor on this.
Well, hey, Sam, that's all the time we got today, man. Thank you so much for dropping in to the dirt to talk to us about this new 963 track loader. Obviously, a lot of really great features and improvements on this thing. So, yeah, man, thank you again, and be well, bud.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of The Dirt. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Sam Meeker of Caterpillar for joining us today to talk about the new Cat 963. Always love chatting with Sam. It's always a pleasure. And we want to hear what you guys think about this new machine as well. Be sure to drop us a comment below and let us know what you think about the new Cat 963 and all of the features that we talked about in today's episode. And if you like this video, found the information in it useful at all, just like hearing Sam talk, be sure to hit that like button below. It really helps our channel out. And if you want more coverage on construction equipment or construction industry news, head on over to our website at equipmentworld.com. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our daily newsletter so you're getting all of this news and coverage in your inbox every day. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe right here on YouTube, and be sure to turn on notifications. Hit the bell below so that you're getting up-to-the-minute alerts whenever we drop a new video. All right, guys, thank you so much again for watching this episode of The Dirt, and we'll see you in the next one.